Good to see you all. Um, we're about to begin class again. So, Snehi, if you'd like to put up the prayers, I think most people know these simple prayers that we say, but just for the sake of if someone doesn't, we'll take refuge, generate bodhicitta. And if you've meditated on these, it's good to say them very slowly and meditate on the words. There we go. So that when you do say them during a teaching, it brings up some feeling, not just like just saying mere words. Sangye churang suki chognam la jangchu bagu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunen gipe sognam ki rola penchir sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang suki chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penchir sangye drupa sho. Then short mandala. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kam Niryataya Mi. Thank you. So we will begin with a little meditation to try to put those words into practice. Generally, in our meditation, we haven't stressed so much the refuge part of things, more on the bodhicitta and the emptiness and renunciation, but sort of is such a essential point to be able to take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. When Atisha came to Tibet, when he was requested by the Dharma king in Tibet to revivify Buddhism, he was known as the Refuge Lama because he taught everywhere he went, he taught about refuge, what the meaning is. So within a state of a sense of taking refuge, especially in the Dharma, which is the actual refuge, the Buddha who taught the Dharma, and the Sangha who help us to take the medicine of the Dharma. Sit comfortably, back straight, eyes slightly closed, still open. See if you can listen to your heartbeat. I say that at the beginning because that's obviously not something that you easily can control consciously. I don't know many people who can control it. In the same way, the breath is something you can control, but you want to look at it the same way as listening to your heart, just watching it without controlling it. Once you recognize it, hold it in mindfulness to the exclusion of everything else, recognizing simply when you're breathing in as opposed to breathing out, whether it's a long breath as opposed to a short breath, and so forth. You notice your mind going off on some conceptual tangent, thinking about things other than the breathing. Bring it back forcefully. Bring it back to the breathing, the respiration. In the end, the meditators who have investigated deeply the connection with this breathing meditation and further meditation on Jine and so forth, say that what you're trying to develop is a mental image of the air element. So the air element is that which is light and moving, light in the sense of not heavy. With a little success in calming your mind from the thoughts that were there before, place your attention instead on your mental consciousness. Sometimes you can try to bring your attention to your heart chakra, that area where there is more sense of the ego. Look at the contents of your mind. Recognize that the substratum within which they're arising, sort of the basis, the womb within which they're arising, is the conventional mind. It's clear light nature, like a clear sky, a clear space. It doesn't hinder thoughts from leaving. Things that are disturbing, you can let go of them in an instant if you are trained. Likewise, you can develop instantaneously positive thoughts. You can enter them into your mind, whether they will remain firmly, it depends on your familiarity with them. Virtuous thoughts, for instance, renunciation, bodhicitta, wisdom. Try to focus on this particular aspect of the conventional clear light nature of your mind, the fact that it lacks any obstruction to the arisal or dismissal of thoughts, their reabsorption and back into the mind. So in a sense, this is a little bit introduction to meditating on the ultimate nature of the mind, because the aspects of both are mere negations. There's not the appearance of anything, any color, any shape, but they're induced, those meditative stabilizations on the conventional or the ultimate nature of the mind are induced by their individual reasonings. So what you're understanding is different. Here, this conventional clear light nature of the mind is also called the developmental Buddha nature. to think we have all the time, whether we're rich or poor, criticized or praised, imprisoned or free, whatever, animal, human, we have this clear light nature of the mind, and we can develop, because of it, these good qualities and dismiss negative qualities, negative faults. The fact that we can recognize that and feel some joy is because of this auspicious moment right now. The Buddha referred to a life of leisure and endowment as an auspicious moment because it comes so rarely. It's so valuable, so useful, comes so rarely, difficult to find again, difficult to create the conditions for. We can use this situation now, as long as we live, for our own aims, our worldly aims, which the Buddha suggested is not a very good idea, because this life will end. All of the pleasures that we seek, the power, the control, the fame, the love, and so forth, none of them are of the nature of real happiness. But we can use it to find real happiness, Dharma happiness. And beyond that, we can use it to be able to help other sentient beings find Dharma happiness, ultimate happiness. All living beings exactly like us and wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering, have been intimately related with us in numberless lives. They've been depthlessly kind as mothers. They've been the bases upon which we can practice patience. Most of them are without any Dharma guide. So to think, for their benefit, I would like to be able to extricate them from the ocean of suffering and place them into everlasting blissful happiness. To do that, I have to be not just a bodhisattva, not just even a 10th level bodhisattva, but to do it perfectly, effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error. I have to be a fully enlightened Buddha. To achieve that state, I need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom. And to do that, I need to know what they are. How to meditate on wisdom of emptiness, how to accumulate merit, the extensive deeds of the bodhisattvas, which are explained in Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, commented on by Chandrakirti's Madhyamakavatara and its commentary, his own commentary. And with a gap of hundreds of years, Lama Tsongkhapa again wrote an explanation of it, the Gompa Rapsal that we're studying, commenting on it. So think, I'm going to participate today, listening to the teachings, contemplating them, weighing them in my mind. And when I get insights, whether in class or later, holding it single-pointedly in meditation to develop the wisdoms of hearing, contemplation, and wisdom. In order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That's my aim. That's my goal. Whether I'm interrupted with a broken pipe in the kitchen or someone blowing leaves outside, making a lot of racket, whatever happens, just blips along the way. My goal is to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And then bring your attention back to the present. Good to see you. Oh, Rachel's here Rachel, where are you right now? In India again? Maybe she can't speak. Okay.
Yes, I'm in Tabu in Spiti Valley, which is in Himachal Pradesh, but in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, good. Excellent. So how are we doing? How's your meditation going? Suvansh, how's your meditation going?
Venerable George, I joined late if you're talking about the morning meditation, but it was very good to hear you.
You didn't join it, but it was good to listen to. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying I joined late. I got only a few minutes.
Oh, okay. Got it. So any Dharma questions before we begin? Any Dharma itches you need scratched? We okay? So before we begin, as I have done in the previous classes in the sixth chapter, I want to read a little motivation that corresponds to the same motivation that Geshe Zopa gave on in 2000, I guess in 2000 at Deer Park. Oh no, in 2001 at Deer Park. So he quoted a verse from Aryadeva, which we have talked about before. When I say from Aryadeva was the main disciple of Nagarjuna, you recall, right? And one of Aryadeva's most famous text is his so-called 400 stanzas. Sometimes in the commentaries, it's just referred to as the 400. Hi, John. Good to see you. So this is from the 400 stanzas. It happens to be stanza 190, or you could say verse 190. So it says, at the beginning, prevent the demeritorious. I mean, it's the negative. In the middle, prevent the self. That's referring to ideas of the gross self. So first you have to, in entering into finally understanding emptiness, you have to first overcome the minds that are demeritorious. Then you can, then sequentially, you don't dive into the most subtle aspects of emptiness. You prevent the coarse self, ideas of the coarse self. And at the end, once you've done that, finally, you destroy wrong views of all kinds. Whoever knows this is wise, Aryadeva said. So this corresponds very much with the flavor of the stages of the path. You know, to develop an understanding based on controlling the mind, overcoming negativity, then developing virtues, and then controlling the mind, like the famous verse that the Buddha quoted. These are the Buddhist teachings. So in Anne Klein's, not Anne Klein, in Janet Gatso's, I think Janet, translation of this, she was translating, I think Gyaltsabche's commentary to these verses. So Aryadeva's verses had commentaries, Chandrakirti also wrote commentary to the verses, but this is on using Gyaltsabje's commentary. Gyaltsabje was one of the disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa, his two main disciples, right? His commentary was initially, therefore, disciples should be taught about virtuous and non-virtuous actions and about cause and effect, since they are easy to understand. And as a result of that, the implication is that you would avoid negativity and try to create virtue. As it is the proper time, they should thus be prevented from engaging in demeritorious misdeeds. Next, the coarse self, the gross self, should be repudiated by refuting the referent object of the 20 views of the transitory collection. We'll be talking about that in the 6th chapter, the 20 views of the transitory collection. You know what the transitory collection means? Don, do you remember what the transitory collection is? You're saying something, but we can't hear you because you're muted.
It's the view of seeing our aggregates, seeing them as inherently existent, and then thinking I and mine as also inherently existent.
Right. So that would be the Prasangika view. So in lower schools, they would view, viewing so when we talk about the view of the transitory collection, the I is imputed upon, designated to the collection of the aggregates, all of which are impermanent or transitory. So that's kind of the sense of that. So first of all, one meditates on that. Later, when the mind stream has become receptive, the selflessness of persons is taught. And by showing that even selflessness does not exist truly, all views conceiving extremes are prevented. Whoever knows these stages of teaching is wise regarding the sequence in which trainees are led. It is like a skilled physician who prescribes a bland or oily diet to specific patients, sort of like giving you something that's appropriate at your stage, and then later maybe you can add something to that. So Geshe-la mentioned this at that time. He also quoted a verse from the Madhyamaka in the 1st chapter. Kewo dikun dewa ngundu ching. So these migrators, these beings, all desire happiness. Minam dewang longcho me minla. But they're without resources, there is no happiness. Longsho kyangni jinle junkenne, having understood that Longsho kyangni jinle, that resources arise from generosity, from giving, like Christ said, he reap what you sow, right? If you are generous, you create the karma. I'm interpreting Christ's dictum in a Buddhist way. Probably, maybe he would agree also that if you are generous, you will find a karmic response to that later of having resources. Tupe dangpo jimpe tamze de. So the Muni, the Buddha, initially gave discourse on giving. So when we talked about the 6 perfections, in that chapter, when we talked about the perfection of generosity, perfection of giving, it was mentioned that very incredibly deep, when you talk about the skill of the Buddha, as I say many times, teaching effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error, exactly what needs to be known. So giving, first of all, discourse on giving, even before giving discourse on morality. You might think, why didn't he teach about morality first? Because some people are not ready for that yet, but they want to be happy, so they're willing to engage in generosity once it's explained about karma. And then when they've accumulated some merit, they can understand that simply having resources in the future would be fruitless if you're born in the lower realms. So they would engage in morality and so forth. So Geshe-la said, elaborated much more on it, but I won't talk much more. Maybe one other thing about this. Okay, so last class. Oh, KT, you have a thought?
Just thinking about Arya Deva's verse and starting with the transitory collection through deeper selflessness and then into the views and selflessness of phenomena. But then why in this text in chapter 6 do we start off eventually with the phenomena first and then later go into the selflessness parts? It's like it's inverted, or just in general, or maybe I missed something earlier that was said about this, but I was wondering about that, please. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So generally, when we talk about realization of emptiness, usually we say that the first taste of realization of emptiness takes place with respect to the selflessness of the person, the emptiness of the person. And then that can be understood later, can be perceived more vividly than with respect to other phenomena. But when it's presented, the order of presentation of emptiness usually begins with the emptiness of phenomena. So that dichotomy, how it's presented and how it's realized, is addressed many times in the teachings. Why that's the case. In this 6th chapter, the very first thing we're going to talk about is Nagarjuna. Well, we'll talk about some other things coming, the 10 equalities of phenomena and so forth. But the first logical reasonings about emptiness are talking about the emptiness of a sprout, for instance, something which is born, created. That it's not born from itself. It's not born from something which is utterly different than itself, inherently different from itself. It's not born from something which is both the same and different, and it's not born without cause. So it's talking about phenomena in general. Although that could be applied to the self, it's talking about impermanent phenomena in general. So there is that disparity but when you actually apply the reasonings, your first actual insight into emptiness has to do with the selflessness of the person, because that's what's most dominant in our mind. That's the sort of like the closest cause to the creation of our afflictions. I've been abused. I want, and so forth. So that ego identity is easily viewed. And when I say easily viewed, it's a difficult, as we talked about many times, identifying the object of negation, how that idea of ourself appears in our mind, not just in a philosophical sense, like, oh, I'm a painter, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a man, I'm a woman, something like that, but on intimate nature in your mind, recognizing it, instigating that sense by remembering some time when you were abused, for instance, or you say, oh, you stole that from me. And you say, in your mind, there arises the thought of I very clearly that seems to be existing there from its own side. So that's the reason that there's that difference in presentation. Usually the Buddha presented the emptiness of phenomena first. Okay. Rocio, what do you think?
No, I had a question on the quote you were translating from the Madhyamaka Avatara that Geshe Sopa quoted. Thank you very much for quoting that. Because it is, if I understand, these beings are all desire happiness, but without resources, there is no happiness. Having understood that resources arise from generosity, the Muni Buddha taught a discourse on giving. Is that the last phrase?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what he taught first. When he first taught people, he taught about giving first. So you can find that in your text. It's the let me see. It's in chapter 1. It's verse 10 of chapter 1. Jimpa's. You can go back and look in chapter 1. Or the first bhumi, because the first bhumi was talking about the perfection of generosity, perfection of charity, and the 10th verse will be that one. Okay. So last time we ended with this statement, and seeing that others like Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas cannot teach the profound dependent origination like bodhisattvas. They can't teach it in the way that bodhisattvas can. These individuals who have developed an appreciation for emptiness will come to tremendously revere the bodhisattvas who aspire to perfect awakening. Remember that. So that's Jimpa page 165, and in Anne Klein's book, page 158. Okay, so that's where we had introduced that last time. So just before that, when we talked about, so this section was called the way higher qualities ensue if suchness is expounded. Right, so here we talked about the verse 5 of the 6th chapter, the final line of that, and was, for them the ensuing qualities will come to birth, and then continuing in verse 6, adopting perfect morality, they will always abide in it. They will practice generosity and cultivate compassion. They will practice patience, forbearance, and they will dedicate thoroughly their virtue to freedom for all beings. So that, remember, we discussed that last time. In essence, that meant that once they've started to get at emptiness, understand it, they will understand that in order to have a continuity of rebirths, to continue the practice of emptiness, to escape from cyclic existence, or to become enlightened, they need to practice ethics, morality, shila. And so they will abide by it very carefully, and that they will, knowing that even having a higher rebirth without resources, they will be troubled. They won't be able to practice. Like many people now have a human rebirth, but because of various obstacles, not having been generous in previous lives, they lack resources. They can't go on retreats. They can't attend teachings. They can't buy books. So they will practice generosity. They will practice patience, because anger being the major obstacle to keeping the merit that we have, and they will dedicate it finally. So we talked about that. We talked about the reasons for that in a couple of pages. So here it says, and seeing that others like Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas cannot teach the profound dependent origination like bodhisattvas, they will come to tremendously revere the bodhisattvas who aspire to perfect awakening. Okay, so continuing on, that next paragraph says, for those of the Mahayana, for those of the great vehicle, whose understanding of the view of emptiness has penetrated the essential point, a perfect understanding as described above will arise. And they will become reverential toward cultivating the vast aspects of the path. I have the right pair of glasses on here. I've got my two iPads on the same side now. Usually I had to go, I got one above the other. And translated that paragraph as, once pure understandings, such as these explained above, are generated in beings of the Mahayana, whose understanding of the view of emptiness has arrived at the essential points. So they've gotten to the deep understanding of what's essentially the object of negation, how it's negated, and so forth. Those beings of the Mahayana will have great respect for achieving the class of extensive deeds and so forth. So that means the extensive side, the oceanic side. So generally in the merit field, we have these two sides, the method side, which talks about the extensive deeds of the Bodhisattvas. Also, the method side includes how we deal with conventional reality, karma, compassion, and so forth. And the wisdom side, I'm using my right hand, but that's referring to the left of Lama Tsong Khapa, the lineage gurus of the wisdom side, which is talking about the understanding of ultimate reality. So once they've understood wisdom, they will get more serious about practicing the extensive deeds of the Bodhisattvas. Jimpa's translation continued. Let me just get back here. Such people would certainly be objects worthy of the highest acclaim. And said, that combination of wisdom and emptiness and practice of compassionate deeds is a source of great praise. So that means people who have this combination of gotten to the essential points of emptiness, and as a result of that are intent on practicing the Bodhisattva's deeds, the extensive deeds, observing karma, developing compassion and so forth, working for future lives on the conventional side. That's incredibly praiseworthy. Okay, so then commentary on the awakening mind. So this is I believe this is, doesn't say here right away. Oh, yeah, this is Nagarjuna's text, the Bodhicitta Vivarana, which is a composition of Nagarjuna that's taught has been taught many times by the Dalai Lama. It's a very important text. Let's see, where did I go? I missed a page here. This states, those who understand this emptiness of phenomena and also conform to the law of karma and its results, that is more amazing than amazing. That is more wondrous than wondrous. It sounds like Lama Zopa said, oh, fantastic, fantastic. And translated that verse as resorting to actions and their effects upon understanding this emptiness of phenomena is more wonderful than the wonderful, more marvelous than the marvelous. Okay. So such things will come to pass, Lama Tsong Khapa says, for those who have the following two characteristics. They have shunned the two faults. What are these two faults? Forsaking emptiness by being either of the two kinds of unsuitable vessels. one kind of unsuitable vessel is one that lacks admiration for the teachings, sort of a belief and admiration in them. And the other unsuitable vessel is one that seems to admire it, but concludes that reason negates the entire world of cause and effect. We're following the words, at least, making sense? So one kind of person is just not interested in the Dharma, in emptiness. So what's the context here? Such things will come to pass, that they will have this admiration for emptiness and admiration for the extensive deeds, who have the following two characteristics. They don't have these two faults of a wrong vessel. One wrong vessel that doesn't admire, how did he call it here? They lack admiration for the teachings, and the other kind of wrong vessel is one that, although they seem to admire it, they use reasoning in the wrong world, and therefore they negate cause and effect, for instance. They think that emptiness means that phenomena don't exist at all. There's no need to practice morality and so forth. So he said, such things will come to pass for those who have the following two characteristics. So that was one characteristic, being free of those two kinds of faults of a vessel. The second characteristic is they will come to realize that on the basis of the view of emptiness as being the absence of intrinsic existence, or the lack of inherent existence, all presentations, such as causality, are all the more tenable. What does that mean? That means that on the basis of understanding emptiness correctly, they will see that there's no contradiction with the law of cause and effect, which deals with sort of like the conventional world, right? When you're not in meditative equipoise on emptiness, all of the appearances that you experience, whether they be appearances of happiness. When I say appearances of happiness, that means what appears to you is something that is attractive and brings you happiness, or is something that is appearance of that is unpleasant and brings you suffering. All of these things are concordant with the understanding of emptiness. There's no contradiction. So they have come to realize that on the basis of the view of emptiness as the absence of intrinsic existence, all presentations such as causality are all the more tenable. So, and translates that, in addition, they realize that in dependence on the view of emptiness of inherent existence itself, this is on page 159. They have abandoned the two faults of the two types of non-vessel, forsaking the view because of disbelief. Jimpa said non-admiration, although having a facsimile of belief, mistakenly understanding that cause and effects are refuted by the reasoning that establishes emptiness. And they have this additional feature that, in addition, they realize that in dependence on the view of emptiness of inherent existence itself, the great feasibility or tenability that Jimpa was saying of all actions and effects. So Lama Tsongkhapa continued, otherwise, so if you don't, otherwise means if you don't have these factors. Otherwise, when one allegedly engages from the standpoint of someone who has found the view, allegedly, or as Anne says, if something else is taken as the manner of having found the view, you don't have the right view. You've used the wrong reasonings. If one allegedly engages from the standpoint of someone who has found the view, the entire presentation of karma and its effects, such as morality, risks being reduced to something akin to counting the ridges of a rabbit's horn. What is that talking about? I'm afraid to ask anyone. Nadine, what do you think? Can you explain what you think that means?
It's kind of funny because a rabbit's horn does not exist, and so it's kind of a waste of time to count this. But I can't explain.
Right. So a rabbit's horn doesn't exist. So there's it's just idle gossip to be talking about the ridges of a rabbit's horn, or the son of a barren woman does not exist. So it's fruitless to be talking about whether that barren woman's son is handsome, or whether he has a good job, or whether he should go to college and so forth. So, but what's that talking about? It's saying that if one doesn't have the correct view of emptiness, there is a danger that one will give up the acceptance of the law of cause and effect and morality and so forth, the need to practice morality, because morality is the practice where you avoid negative actions and you create virtuous actions. From the Mahayana sense, there's a third factor of also benefiting sentient beings. So there's a danger that you would give them up. And your view then would be something similar to counting the ridges of a rabbit's horn, or the complexion of the son of a barren woman and so forth. It's just your ruminations, your philosophical articles that you would write for journals, or your blog that you would put up about your view of emptiness would be like just, senseless. That's kind of the sense, I think. Make sense? Then he continues, one might come to hold the view that all such presentations of morality and so on are for the benefit of those who have not understood the definitive meaning, but are irrelevant for someone who has understood the definitive meaning. One might come to hold the view that all presentations of morality and so forth are for the benefit of those who have not understood the definitive meaning. So that means those kind of people might think, once you've understood emptiness, you would realize that morality, the law of cause and effect, worrying about future lives and so forth, that's just for people who have not realized emptiness, not reached the definitive view or the definitive meaning. I remember when I was in Beirut, teaching at a school there was an Indian yoga teacher who came, Hatha Yoga, was teaching Hatha Yoga, and he said that he had reached the ultimate view. It's certainly not Buddhist, but and so he realized that. So having realized that, he didn't have to worry about karma. He could drink, he could be debauched, and so forth. It wouldn't harm him. That's just for people who haven't realized, the highest meaning. So that's kind of the sense of that. Does that make sense? Following? Okay. Or as Anne says, this being so, one mistakenly thinks that such teachings on ethics and so forth are for the sake of those who have not understood the definitive meaning, that is, emptiness, but are unnecessary for those who have understood it. So there's a danger if you don't understand emptiness correctly, for falling for that kind of wrong understanding. And the text continues, they are nothing but conceptual fabrications, and all thinking constitutes grasping at signs in the form of clinging to true existence. This is part of this theoretical quotation that started just earlier when it said, one might come to hold a view that, and then there's quotation. So one might think further, but that besides being irrelevant for someone who has understood the definitive meaning, they are nothing. All these presentations of morality, cause and effect, but conceptual fabrications, because the ultimate is to have non-conceptual mind. That's all that counts. And all conceptual thought constitutes grasping at signs, meaning that any kind of conceptual thought is one that is necessarily grasping at inherent existence when there's no inherent existence, and therefore they're nothing but conceptual fabrications, and all thinking constitutes grasping at signs in the form of clinging to true existence. So this is a wrong view that was exemplified by some of the wrong views, especially later, as we'll see in a couple paragraphs about Hashang Mahayana, this Chinese monk. Snehi, what are you thinking?
Venerable George, what we were reading above just now, it reminded me so for someone who thinks they understand the view, but then disregard causality and its effects, then is that person then tending to the nihilist view or extreme? Or is this a different idea than?
Not necessarily nihilistic, but it's within that category. It could be, but they may accept that the appearances, the conventional existence appears, that there is some benefit for those who haven't realized the ultimate view of practicing morality because it may affect their rebirth. But those who have realized the ultimate view don't have to practice that. It's almost as though having realized emptiness, you don't have to worry about karma any longer, like the yoga teacher I was talking about before. Does that sit well? Is that okay? We're staying. Yeah. Okay. So think about it. So we'll talk more. So that ends that kind of misconception. Thus, like the Chinese monk Heshang Mohayen. So let me see here. I get here. Sister. Oh, I just closed that one. Sister Jennifer sent me a Chinese person, a friend of hers, pronunciation of this name. Let me try that. Could you hear that? Anyone? Where's Zoom here?
We could hear it, Venerable George.
You can. Okay. I can't. I've lost the class here somehow. Zoom. Okay. You can't see where everyone is. Oh, how do I get back? I minimized it, I guess. Let me see.
So Thupten Jinpa's phonetic is closer to the correct pronunciation.
Looks like, yeah. Tibetans usually say Hashang or HVA, Hashan. So that sounded more like, let's see again. Sounds like Hoshan, yeah, that kind of like, but yeah, so Jinpa has Heshang. Anyway, it's not very important. I'm still trying to get back in and see all your faces, but I can't get there for some reason. Oh, there we go. Okay. So thus, like the Chinese monk Hoshang Mohayen, or Hashang Mahayana, usually it comes in the text. Hashang or Hoshang in Chinese generally means master. Could actually even be like a layperson who's the master of your life, but generally it means spiritual master. Sometimes people think it means monk, but generally it means master or guru. Mohayen means Mahayana in Chinese. So it's this particular monk around I think the end of the 7th century, was in Lhasa and propagating views that were later criticized, although they had some good points. It was a Mahayana monk talking about the ultimate view of emptiness, but saying that once you had realized emptiness, all other activities were fruitless, like whether a cloud is white or black. That means whether an action, by analogy, whether an action is virtuous or non-virtuous, that you might try to do or try to prevent, it still obscures reality, still obscures the sun. So thus, like the Chinese monk Hashang Mohayen, one will come to undermine all virtues. So some people, although he may not have advocated entirely that kind of view, many of his disciples took to that kind of practice. Nowadays, there are some practitioners of Dzogchen, especially as Namkhe Norbu. Have you heard of Namkhe Norbu, some of you? Namkhe Norbu. Some of his disciples have had that kind of view that, and when they're talking about ultimate view, they mean just not having any conceptions. They're not even talking about realizing emptiness. They're just thinking not having any conceptions, because conceptions are what grasp at inherent existence. You just try to have a mind which is devoid of any thoughts. And therefore, that's the best practice. There's no need to practice morality. There's no need to follow the stages and so forth. Some might say that some might say that for now, one does need to observe the ethical norms. Remember, I said that they might say that until you get to that point where you don't have conceptions, you might have to follow ethical norms from the standpoint of delusory perception. So Anne is saying here, she's translating that. Some say that adopting virtue and discarding non-virtue are done for the time being in the perspective of a mistaken awareness. And Jimpa continues, now if one distinguishes, or he says does distinguish, if one distinguishes two kinds of conceptual thoughts, two kinds of thinking, one that grasps at true existence and one that does not. Okay, let me take a poll. How many people think that there is only one kind of conceptual thought, that all conceptual thoughts are grasping at inherent existence? Oh, Rocio, you think, okay, good. So other people, Dan's joining you, okay. Stephen, all conceptual thoughts grasp at inherent existence? What do you think?
No, I don't think so, Venerable.
No, Nadine, I'll poll you. You know?
No, because one can also conceptually realize emptiness.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. So, in fact, there's even a third kind of conception. There are conceptions that grasp at inherent existence. There are conceptions that are antidotes to conception of true existence, like Nadine said, the realization of emptiness. But as we mentioned in our previous course, when we talked about the practice of emptiness, the the emptiness chapter in the Sacred Words of Manjushri, the Dalai Lama, the fifth Dalai Lama, mentioned that there's and many others, not just the fifth Dalai Lama, there's a third kind of conception that doesn't involve in conceiving or not conceiving inherent existence. Just like the blacksmith, in fact, I gave the example of blacksmith pounding making the horseshoes, and someone says, what horse are you making that for? Oh, that one over there. So that thought, that horse over there, is not grasping it necessarily as inherently existent, because it's not thinking my horse or that beautiful horse or something that is imbuing it with some kind of energizing your view of inherent existence. It's just conceptual. It's just conventionally labeling that horse, so that there's a third kind of conception that besides those that grasp at inherent existence, those that are in antidotes to inherent existence. There's some that just don't, that are just dealing with everyday life, not engaging strongly in grasping at inherent existence. So it says, now if one distinguishes two kinds of thinking, because this other, the Hashan Mahayana was saying that all conceptual thoughts grasp at true existence. So we can see there's whole spectrum of things that do not conceptual thoughts that do not grasp an inherent existence. If one distinguishes two kinds of thinking, one that grasps at true existence and one that does not, then the assertion that reason negating intrinsic existence negates everything becomes meaningless chatter. Okay, we have to unpack that. Snehi, what do you think?
Thank you. Venerable George, I've heard you say this before, and at the time it made sense to me, this, the sentence about the blacksmith neither conceiving, or not conceiving of the horse as being inherently existent. But then now I was thinking, how in Prasangika we say that all perceptions are mistaken, like all perceptions naturally assume inherent existence.
Okay,
yeah.
So all phenomena appear to us as inherently existent. They appear to us inherently existent. So if you go into that and you're looking at it and you think that really is there, that is, that my new iPhone is really nice, which I think, so like inherently nice, then that appearance of it as being inherently existent is solidified by your thinking. That's called inappropriate attention, right? If you don't attend to the phenomena that are appearing to you in an inappropriate way, or let's say for instance, you apply antidotes to it, that it's impermanent, it's not, and so forth and so on, it's not the nature of happiness, or simply if you're just dealing with it in a cursory way without getting involved in being attached to its appearance, just sort of like, by the way, that third kind of conceptual thought can take place. So what you're recalling is that all phenomena appear to be inherently existent, even to a 10th level bodhisattva, when they're not in meditative equipoise on emptiness. But it goes beyond how they appear. It depends on how you grasp them. Do you accede? Do you go along with? Do you adhere to that appearance, or do you not adhere to that appearance, or sort of that third alternative? You don't pay any attention to that appearance. It's just by the way. Stephen, what do you think?
Oh, thank you, Venerable George. So I was thinking about Snehi's question, and also I wondered if there was another category for beings who've had a direct realization of emptiness. So say the path of seeing and above for bodhisattvas, when they might be in post-meditation, could they see a conception and yet have the illusion-like meditation thinking, well, that's not really inherently existent at the same time, and therefore have a conceptual thought, but it not seeing the object as inherently existent?
Right. Well, so getting back to what Nadine said, Nadine was talking about the meditation on conceptual meditation on emptiness. So obviously we can understand emptiness conceptually, right? Before we have a direct realization, we have a conceptual realization of it. And that's an antidote. That's not grasping it as being inherently existent. But even in post-meditation, having realized it directly, or even in post-meditation, having realized it conceptually, when phenomena appear, you can have a conceptual thought that is a remembering consciousness of that understanding and counter your tendency to imbue that phenomena, whatever it is, that phenomenon, with any kind of inherent existence, so that can help to quell your attachment to it or your anger towards something which is irritating, because they don't necessarily inherently exist. Okay, so let's get back to the text. So now, if one does distinguishes these two kinds, that there are some conceptions that are not grasping to inherent existence and some that do, then the assertion that reason negating intrinsic existence negates everything becomes meaningless chatter. Or as Anne translates, if conceptual consciousnesses those who do, if conceptual consciousnesses are wrongly not treated as having those two kinds, if you think there's just one, then the conceptual consciousness of the view, it was a little before that. However, if conceptual consciousnesses are rightly taken to be of two types, this is Anne's translation of that paragraph, those that do and do not conceive a true existence, it is prattle to say that the reasoning refuting inherent existence refutes all objects, because the reasoning that refutes inherent existence would not refute all objects, it just refutes to inherently existing objects. Okay? Getting your mind tightened up here. Actually, when Geshe-la taught this, he said, actually, this section is quite tough. You have to really think about it. Continuing, if one recognizes no such differentiation of two types of thoughts. So in other words, you think all conceptual thoughts, like Hashang, are grasping at signs of inherent existence. If one recognizes no such differentiation of two types of thoughts, then the two categories of realization, those pertaining to the view of emptiness and those pertaining to the aspect of altruistic conduct, will each come to undermine the other, just like heat and cold, just like heat undermines cold. So they're, or contradicts cold, right? So if something is cold, then it's not hot, and so forth. So if one recognizes no such differentiation of the two types of thoughts, then the two categories of realization pertaining to the view of emptiness, so that would be one that is not grasping to signs, and those pertaining to the aspect of altruistic conduct that's dealing with phenomena, and so you are grasping at signs there, so that would be that would tend to be a wrong consciousness. Those pertaining to the view of emptiness will each come to undermine the other, just like heat and cold. So that's the general pitfall of the beginning practice of emptiness, that when you meditate on emptiness, you kind of think that the law of cause and effect can't be true because phenomena are empty of inherent existence. Yet on the other hand, when you think about the law of cause and effect, Bodhisattva's deeds, the extensive deeds, law, and so forth, anything in the method side, dealing with appearances, you think these really exist, therefore emptiness can't be true. They can't be empty because they do exist. They're functioning. I can see them. My wrench turns the nut. my screwdriver turns the screw. Things happen. They're real. Just like hot and cold. Okay. Making sense? Paul, do you have any comment?
All makes sense to me, George.
Oh, okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. So, furthermore, Jinpa's text translates Lama Tsongkhapa as saying, furthermore, it will become impossible to define the delusory perspective, the standpoint from which things are posited, from and it will be impossible to define that and that which posits, so that means the mind, and that which is being posited. Like, say, if you're talking about a chair or something, that which is being posited is the chair, right? So to speak in such terms, and then he has in parentheses, that things are posited purely from a delusory perspective. So to speak in such terms amounts to nothing but a conjuration in the dark. I wanted to say conjugation, conjuration in the dark. But I had to be careful because William would have caught my, he would have. Such protagonists, in fact, uphold the very standpoint critiqued by the treatises referred to above, where Nagarjuna was praising that to have this compatibility of understanding the conventional and understanding emptiness and them not contradicting one another is wondrous, more wondrous than the wondrous, and so forth. In Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principles of the path, or in the Lama Chopa, for instance, when we talk about the view, when we talk about the final view, the intention of Nagarjuna, that the law of dependent arising, cause and effect, and emptiness do not contradict one another, but actually mutually support one another. Because phenomena change, that implies they are not inherently existent, because if they are inherently existent, they couldn't change. Because phenomena are non-inherently existent, all presentations of cause and effects can be presented without error and so forth. So Anne has said, let's see, if conceptual consciousnesses are wrongly not treated as having these 2 types, then the conceptual consciousness of the view of emptiness, trouble getting back to this right place, because consciousness of the view and the class of ethical behavior absurdly would mutually damage one another, like hot and cold, whereas they don't damage one another. They actually support one another if you understand emptiness correctly. But at the beginning, there is a danger of those 2 damaging one another. When you're meditating on emptiness, you think cause and effect can't exist because things are all empty. When you're dealing with conventional phenomena, you think they really work, therefore they can't be empty. That's absurd. So that's a big conundrum. Which are such that one cannot, like hot and cold, which are such hot and cold are such that one cannot exist unaltered in the presence of the other. So when something is hot and you bring something cold there, if you have your hot tea and you drop ice cubes in it, it can't remain unaltered in the presence of that cold, right? Or if you have your cold ice cream cone and you walk out in the sun, it can't remain nice and cold while you're walking down the beach in Santa Monica. It will melt, right? It can't remain unaltered in the presence of the other. Also, there would be no ground for positing the mistaken perspective in which adopting virtue and discarding non-virtue are posited. So there is a correct perspective in which adopting virtue and abandoning non-virtue are positing, but there would be no ground for positing the mistaken perception if you didn't believe, if you believe that all conceptions were grasping at true existence. You couldn't posit it, you couldn't posit correctly how to adopt virtue and abandon non-virtue, and you wouldn't be able to posit the positor or the, how did Jimpa say? What did we say, the positor? Yeah, that which posits or that which imputes, the imputer, the mind which is imputing. And you wouldn't be able to posit or impute those which are posited or those which are imputed. Here, the reason they're using the word posit, I think, is because the Tibetan uses shock rather than the usual, which usually means to posit something, to set it out, rather than using the word for imputation. Hence, such talk is the creation of darkness. So the talk of people who misunderstood Hasha or misunderstand Dzogchen and think that you don't have to practice morality because all conceptual thoughts are grasping the signs of inherent existence. That's just like, boy, that's like the political talk today of some of the political parties. It's just like a creation of darkness. I'll leave you to decide which parties those are. Okay. So then, such protagonists, in fact, uphold the very standpoint critiqued by the treatises referred to above, or as Anne says, therefore, those who put forth these notions are holding the position of the opponents in the above passages, cited from Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti, for they misunderstand the reasoning proving emptiness. They misunderstand that the reasonings proving emptiness to be negating cause and effect. They think that proving emptiness shows that there's no cause and effect. So that's crazy. Okay. We're all on the same page? We're all in the same area? Okay. So then next outline says, urging those who are suitable vessels to listen. So what do they listen to? Well, this discourse on emptiness. So having put forth the virtues of understanding emptiness, now there's the next part of stanza 7, the last 3 lines of stanza 7 are talking about sort of urging or imploring those who are suitable vessels, don't have these faults, to listen to the teachings on emptiness. So that verse says, gaining mastery of ways profound and vast, such persons will gradually attain the ground of perfect joy. So that's the joyous, the first ground. Before they've realized emptiness, they have to go through the path of accumulation, preparation, and then when they have a direct realization of emptiness, they enter the first bhumi, the joyous ground. So all those who thus aspire, pray listen to this path. There's a little bit kind of old church way of saying things, or as Anne translated, being skilled in the modes of the profound, meaning the meaning of emptiness, and the vast, compassionate deeds, will gradually attain the very joyous ground. Hence, those seeking that ground should listen to this path. She doesn't use pray. Pray, listen to this path. So imploring them, right? That's kind of like that. So Lama Tsongkhapa continues, such people, while gaining mastery of ways profound and vast, as described above, on the ordinary ground, that means before realizing emptiness directly, will definitely gather the collections of virtue of both profound and vast aspects for a long time without interruption. So that means, what would be the collections of profound virtues? What would that be called? The collection of what? That's a collection of wisdom, right? Profound virtue. So when we talk about the collections of merit and wisdom, right? All of those are virtuous. We don't use, they're not all merits, because virtues are of two kinds. There are meritorious virtues that give rise to rebirth and experiences within cyclic existence, and there are collections of wisdom that give rise to realization of emptiness, that are causes for the Dharmakaya. So here's they will definitely gather the collections of virtues of both profound and vast aspects for a long time without interruption, meaning a long time this life, and by practicing morality, having a continuity of human rebirths in the future, will practice for a long time in the future, and so forth. Because of this, such persons will gradually attain the joyous ground of perfect joy. So all those who thus aspire to attain the ground of perfect joy, pray listen to this profound path that will be presented below. In this way, they are being urged here. Okay, or exhorted, and says, therefore, those seeking the very joyous ground should listen to the profound path about to be explained. And in this way, Chandrakirti exhorts them, urges them to listen. So I urge you to listen at the beginning of our class, because listen to the teaching will help you to collect the two collections so that you can become a Buddha, an omniscient being, to benefit all sentient beings who've been so kind to you, and so forth. Okay, making sense? Pretty clear, right? A little bit difficult there in the middle, some of the words, but so now quotation from the 400 commentary to the 400 stanzas. So the 400 stanzas was written by Aryadeva. I gave a quotation from that at the beginning of our class with some commentary by Gyaltsab in the motivation. But here, this is talking about Chandrakirti's commentary to the 400 stanzas, which is very extensive, one of his several commentaries. So he says, if he grows to esteem the discourse on emptiness of intrinsic existence, then by cultivating conditions conducive to it, his behavior will help increase his admiration for emptiness. Is using the male first, second person pronoun here. His compassion, or their compassion, will be great. They will repay the kindness of the blessed Tathagata, and they will have the wish to completely relinquish the causes that obstruct the sublime Dharma, which are namely the causes of the great abyss. So the great abyss, often when we talk about the great abyss, that means, like a cattle, let's say yaks, rummaging on the cliffs in Tibet, getting next to the edge. If they just step a little bit further, they'll fall down the cliff into the abyss. That means the analogy here is the lower realms. right? They will have the wish to completely relinquish the causes that obstruct the sublime Dharma, namely the causes of the great abyss, practicing non-virtue and so forth. They will consider the destitute. They will consider the destitute and will give away even those things that are hard to give. So hard to give, obviously, are things that are very dear to you, but the hardest thing to give is your own body. Or as Lama Yeshe used to say, maybe even giving your body is sometimes can be not so difficult, like giving it to the mosquitoes or whatever, but to give your time, you want to have your time. You don't want to be bothered by people. So things that are hard to give generally means your body and life. He will consider the destitute, those who are poor, and will give away even those things that are hard to give. He will gather others as well through the four means of attraction. So that's referring to the bodhisattva practice of how does he call it here? Gathering, the four means of gathering. Do you know what those are? John, do you know the four means of gathering?
No, I don't.
Sean, do you know?
No, I wish I did.
Stephen, I think, might know. He's looking.
Well, yeah, Venerable George, I'm cheating, and I'm reading from footnote 306. So the four, giving what is immediately needed, especially material needs, using pleasant speech, giving sound spiritual advice, and living in accord with what you teach.
Right. So the way that bodhisattvas, so once you've developed bodhicitta and you want to be able to help sentient beings, some of them, to become your disciples, you need to gather them in such a way that they will believe you and follow you and so forth. So at first, the first thing is to be able to ingratiate yourself to them by giving them something. If they need, you bring them a pie when they move into the house, or they, you give them something material that can alleviate their suffering, so they pay attention. They have a positive view of you. Then you, when they have any kind of worldly problems, since they have been sort of close to you because of your kindness, you can give everyday solutions to their problems. What did the note say there for the second one, Stephen?
The second is using pleasant speech, Venerable George.
Yeah. So you speak you speak kindly to them, hello, and so forth. And then once you have become close to them, then you can actually give advice to their problems. And finally, fourth one, Stephen, what does it say?
Living in accord with what you teach.
Yeah. So not being contradictory, not telling them to be generous and not being generous yourself, not telling them to be moral, but yourself being immoral. Like we hear a lot of the certain religious traditions in America anyway, spouting about morality, but then when you find out that they are embezzling funds and are themselves engaged in all sorts of immorality, it's kind of like the opposite of that. Okay, making sense? So once you have understood this, gaining mastery in ways profound and vast, such persons will gradually attain the ground of perfect joy. So all those who thus aspire, pray, listen, and so forth. As Anne said, so she translates that section from the commentary to the 400 stanzas. So this is Chandrakirti's commentary. So that would not have appeared in Chandrakirti's Madhyamakavatara. He wouldn't have quoted his own commentary. None of this is found in the Madhyamakavatara. When persons develop an interest in discourse on the emptiness of inherent existence, they establish conditions concordant with it so as to increase clarity with respect to emptiness. They are very compassionate and grateful to the supramundane victors, means the Buddhists, the ones gone thus, due to wishing to abandon completely the causes for falling into the great abyss of bad rebirths, a circumstance that interrupts their practice of excellent doctrine. They resort to repentance and give even that which is difficult to give, that is, even their own flesh. So what did Jimpa say that here about repentance? As we're gradually thinking those who completely release the causes, he will consider the destitute and give away even those things that are hard to give. So I think I think that what Jimpa is translating is destitute, and is more correctly translating as they will resort to repentance and give even that which is difficult to give, that is their own flesh. They also gather students through the four modes of gathering. So this is when the Bodhisattva deeds are explained in the Lan Rim, usually after the 6 perfections, they don't talk about the other 4 perfections. They talk about the 4 means of gathering disciples, which is what we're talking about here. They also gather students or disciples through the 4 modes of gathering. They teach this excellent doctrine with all endeavor to beings who have become vessels for the excellent doctrine. Okay. We're all together here? Making sense? So then continuing, so as the above teaches, all these words that have been then said, one should reveal this discourse with great effort. Shanka just messaged, sorry, I'm not there, not well. Okay. So as the above teaches, one should reveal this discourse with great effort. Or as Anne says, accordingly, this doctrine must be taught with great endeavor to those free of the 2 faults of non-vessels. Or as Jimpa says, so the above teaches one should reveal this discourse with great effort. This, of course, to those who are free of the 2 faults. Maybe they should be, those 2 lines should be connected together. Those who are free of the 2 faults of being an unsuitable vessel. And so you should go out of your way and with great effort, like we're trying to do, all of us here, to talk about and understand emptiness, even to those who have admiration but do not understand it exactly as it is. One should explain the teaching skillfully so that it does not undermine their conviction independent origination in the law of cause and effect, conventional phenomena being validly established, and so forth. For a speaker who is most learned to teach his listeners or their listeners, including those at least minimally qualified as suitable vessels, is a deed of great merit. For example, there is a quotation from the Compendium of Sutras. So this is quoting initially from the sutra, the Sutra Samuccaya, which Paul very kindly gave us, remember some months ago, gave us a whole translation up to a certain point, and we're working on trying to get the translation of the final part scanned. It's quite interesting. So this is, first of all, this is Nagarjuna speaking. Whoever aspires for the profound teaching collects all merit, for they will, until Buddhahood is attained, accomplish all the mundane and supramundane perfect factors. And then there's a quotation from a sutra called The Gift of Youth Ratna. That's how Jimpa translates it. And translated as the sutra given by the precious child sutra, or the Ratna, the gift of youth Ratna. So perhaps the youth in this sutra has the proper name Ratna. Like instead of saying Daniel roar, we would say Ratna roar, the precious roar. So this is the quotation how Jimpa translates it. O Manjushri. So obviously the Buddha is speaking to Manjushri here, Bodhisattva Manjushri, compared to a bodhisattva bereft of skillful means, who is lacking skill and means, who engages in the 6 perfections for hundreds or thousands of eons. So someone who is lacking skill and means, but is a bodhisattva lacking skill and means, but practices the perfections for hundreds or thousands of eons, compare that with someone who listens to this class of teaching on emptiness, even with doubt. That person who listens to this teaching, even with doubt, will generate far more merit than a bodhisattva who lacks skill and means, engaging in the 6 perfections for hundreds of eons. Listening to this discourse on emptiness, even with doubt, they collect more merit. If this is so, what need is there to speak of listening to it without doubt? So hopefully some of us are listening, studying the teachings without doubt, right? That is, maybe we have some doubt, but no, Sean, you have doubts, right? You're not listening without doubt. You don't want to comment. Okay. So if you were to listen without doubt, there's obviously even more merit. What need is there to speak of someone who writes it out in words, transmits it through reading, upholds it, and teaches it extensively to others as well? So this is talking about the great benefit. So what did this is calling? Urging those who are suitable vessels to listen, right? So this quotation from the sutra, and translates it a different way, and translates it, Manjushri, whoever listens, even with doubt, to this rendition of the teachings, generates much greater merit than a bodhisattva who, lacking skill and means, and hopefully Stephen will look up footnote 74 there, practices the 6 perfections for 100,000 eons. This being so, what need is there to say anything about a person who listens without doubt? What need is there to say anything about a person who imparts the scripture in writing, right? Memorizes it, and also teaches it thoroughly and extensively to others. So Jimpa had said, what need is there to speak of someone who writes it out in words, transmits it through reading, which should accord more with the Tibetan here. It's talking about giving the lung of it. You've committed it to writing. You've written it out, leave an imprint in your mind. You've explained, you've given the lung, the transmission to others, like Ananda. So thus did I hear at one time, the Buddha said, many times people that were not present for a discourse of the Buddha ask Ananda and others, Ananda was the final authority, what the Buddha said in that discourse, and he would from memory recite, pass on the oral transmission of that. what need is there to speak of someone who writes it down in words, transmits it through reading, upholds it, or as Anne says, memorizes it. So sometimes this word zunghua means upholds it, means they've memorized it. So they've written it out. That's one way of memorializing the teaching. They give the transmission, they memorize it, and teach it thoroughly and extensively to others. Mikhail, what are you thinking?
Thank you, Venerable. What is exactly a bodhisattva bereft of skillful means?
So skillful means upaya, has both implications of knowing what the right thing to do is, but also lacking skill and means in wisdom also. So here, a bodhisattva bereft of skillful means, or as Anne said, lacking skill and means. And Stephen, did you look up note 74? What does Anne say from the commentary by Yeshe Thupten, I think?
Yeah, she just says Yeshe Thupten oral commentary explained as lacking of emptiness. That's on page 268 of Path to the Middle.
Okay, so generally when you talk about skill and means, it sounds like it's dealing with the conventional, but skill and means also means having understanding of emptiness. And so lacking that, let's say, for instance, when you practice the perfections, they have to be conjoined with the perfection of wisdom to be a surpassing practice, right? So if a bodhisattva is practicing, even for eons, say on the path of accumulation, path of preparation, without deeply understanding emptiness, even they try to practice generosity, thinking that there is a real giver, a real object that's being given, a real recipient, and so forth, inherently existent, they would of course accumulate a lot of merit, because even ordinary lay people that don't know about emptiness, when I say ordinary lay people, even non-bodhisattvas, ordinary people making gifts, that has a karmic consequence. They will experience happiness in the future, but they won't accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom. So I think that's what's being talked about there. Okay? We're doing okay? Richard, you're looking up? Okay. Okay.
I was just looking at Anne Klein's translation, looking at the footnotes.
Yeah. So that's a good resource there. So then there's a quotation from the Vajra cutter, which unfortunately everyone calls the diamond cutter. This is one of my my pet peeves. I think one of our Dharma friends, Michael Roach, who used to be called Geshe Michael Roach, I don't know if he's still going by that name, wrote a book called The Diamond Cutter, his translation of the Vajracetaka. But as I've mentioned several times, nowhere in the Sanskrit or the Tibetan is the word diamond mentioned. It's only the Chinese tradition where the Vajracetaka was transmitted to China that they came to call it the Diamond Sutra. They didn't call it the Diamond Cutter. They just called it the Diamond Sutra, that people have come to associate the word Vajra with diamond. As I've mentioned before, in Kamalashila's commentary and in Asanga's commentary to the Vajracutter, to the Vajracutter, the Vajracetaka, they don't mention the word diamond. And when asked in Kamalashila's commentary, it says, why is it called the Vajracutter? And Kamalashila says, because it's big in the beginning, it's small in the middle, it's big at the end. I have a Vajra this time. You know what a Vajra looks like. It's big in the middle, at the beginning, small in the middle, big in the end. Not quite sure what Kamalashila meant by that, but it doesn't say diamond in it. Anyway, we'll go by the translation here. In the Diamond Cutter 2, it says, the Blessed One stated, the Bhagavan stated, That means the Buddha. Subhuti, what do you think? It's like me asking in class, Don, what do you think? Right? Richard, what do you think? Blessed One, the Bhagavan said, Subhuti, what do you think? Say, for example, there were banks of the river Ganges, equal in number to the number of grains of sand that exist on the banks of the river Ganges. There's a in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, many times talking about the grains of sand, or you could say dirt or atoms of dirt on the banks of the river Ganges. So river Ganges goes a long way, right? It has banks on both sides, either sandy or dirty, a lot of particles. If you were to try to count those particles, it's just like innumerable. So if you were to take as many river Ganges, if there were banks of the river Ganges equal in number to those particles, so multiplying it exponentially, right? Will this be a great number of grains of sand? And Subhuti answers, was this Subhuti, right? Subhuti answers, if the grains of sand on the banks of the Ganges are so numerous, what need is there to speak of the grains of sand of that many banks of the Ganges, replied Subhuti. To this, the Bhagavan replied, O Subhuti, I will share this with you, or I will impart this to you. Understand this. So this is a kind of statement the Buddha made in many sutras. So I'm going to say something to you, understand it, keep it in mind. Say a man or woman fills world systems equal in number to the grains of sand on the banks of the river Ganges with 7 types of precious materials. So there's classic, diamonds and rubies and lapis lazuli, 7 precious kind of things, and offers these to the Tathagatas. Will that man or woman generate on that basis a vast amount of merit? Yeah, of course. World systems full of the 7 types of jewels, as many as there are grains of sands of the river Ganges. Of course, they're going to accumulate. So Subhuti says, Bhagavan, yes, this will be a vast amount, O Tathagata. This will indeed be a vast amount, right? Not surprising. So then the culmination, then the Blessed One, the Bhagavan said, one who upholds even a stanza of 4 lines of this Dharma discourse, here he says class of teachings, we say Chuki Namdang, and reveals it to others as well, will generate even greater merit. Or as Anne says, that final sentence, that final phrase, the Bhagavan said, if someone retains in memory, so Jimpa said here, if one upholds even a stanza, she gives commentary that this is referring to memorizing, upholding it or holding it. So there are various ways that this comes in the sutra. Sometimes the word changwa, which actually means hold in mind. Sometimes here is zungwa, means can also mean to uphold the teachings. But here, the commentary that the master that she was relying on, it was explaining this means that if you memorize even a stanza of 4 lines of this Dharma discourse, so what does she say here? From this rendition of the teaching, and also teaches this to others, much more merit will accrue. So if you listen to these teachings, and it's like if you read the Vajracharaka and you memorize some verses and you teach it to others, you accumulate incredible vast amount of merit, because what you're presenting to people is this first seed of understanding of emptiness. In also another quotation from Aryadeva, there's a famous quotation that even having a doubt about emptiness of phenomena and persons shakes the foundations of samsara, of one's own samsara. That means once you have a doubt, not necessarily leading in the right direction, but even neutral doubt about the meaning of emptiness, creates a situation where your future stay in cyclic existence will be sort of like it's being crumbled a bit, sort of like a big boulder that's blocking the pass and on the way to McLeodganj or in India or Dharamsala, and the buses can't get by. Even the very first time that someone takes a sledgehammer to that big boulder to get it out of the way, even they put a little teeny crack in it that already has undermined the blockage, right? With a little more work, you can split it apart, get it off the road and go through. So in the same way, even having a doubt about inherent existence, having had it explained to you correctly, thinking maybe that's right, I don't know, that already undermines your future samsara. Okay? Making sense? Jennifer? You okay? Okay. So then, in the Sutra Samuccaya, which is this text by Nagarjuna where he collects so many quotations from Mahayana Sutras, I think in Bhikkhu Prasadita's sort of prelogue to that, he said, I think there were something like 69 different sutras, I'm not sure exactly the number, that were quoted by Nagarjuna in that. Also in Shantideva's Compendium of Trainings, he quotes many Mahayana sutras. So there are ones that people don't necessarily usually think of. So here, another quote from the Sutra Samuccaya by Nagarjuna, he's quoting the Treasury of the Tathagata Sutra, the Tathagata Kosha Sutra, which is, I'm having difficult finding, maybe Paul can help me find it. The catalog I have, I can't search it for the words. I have to look through the pages. And, it's not necessarily in alphabetical order. So if you can find where that is.
I'll try, George. I'll try, Uncle George.
So in the Treasury of the Tathagata Sutra 2, it means also, it's similar to these other verses, after enumerating the 10 great non-virtues. So when you talk about the non-virtuous actions, the 10 non-virtues, it states, if someone who possesses these 10 non-virtues, so they have on their mind stream, they've committed these 10 non-virtues, were to enter the teaching of selflessness with faith and aspiration, or as Anne translated, possessing this, enters the doctrine of selflessness, has faith and belief. Jimpa says faith and aspiration. The Tibetan word is mupa, which can mean belief, can mean aspiration, can mean sort of admiration. So it's sort of like you appreciate or admire these. If a person enters the teachings of selflessness with faith and aspiration, and understand all phenomena as being primordially pure, means from the very beginning, like when we talked about the meaning in the Hinayana Sutras of primordially pure or so forth, that means that they have never been inherently existent. They've been pure from the beginning. They've been absent. There's never been from the beginning any inherent existence. If they enter those teachings to understand all phenomena as being primordially pure, such a sentient being will not go to the lower realms. Actually, the sutra doesn't say that. The sutra actually says, the Bhagavan says, I say they will not go to the lower realms. Do you see a difference in that? Where is it? I have that here somewhere. I thought I made that note here. Oh, it didn't. Yeah, okay. I didn't I translated this and it didn't transfer to my iPad. So there's a longer quote talking about the 10 non-virtues. In this case, I think it is not Subhuti, it is Kashyapa, the Bodhisattva Kashyapa that Buddha is talking to. And he's explaining this. If a person who enters into the teachings of emptiness with faith and admiration for those teachings, appreciation for them, in order to understand them, and that all phenomena are primordially pure from the beginning, such a sentient being, and the sutra gives other synonyms of sentient beings, such a sentient being, such a living being, such a person, and so forth, or maybe that's in the following one. They will. I do not say that they will go to the lower realms. Okay, so that's incredibly relevant to us. So even we think, I don't, like Sean, I don't understand anything. We're lost. We're doomed. I'm doomed. Just having faith in these, even though that might be difficult for some, and admiration for them. Oh, wow. That beyond what Aryadeva said was shaking samsara, that the Buddha prophesies that someone, even having committed great negative actions, the 10 non-virtues, the Buddha said, I would not say they would go to the lower realms. So that doesn't mean that they won't go to the lower realms. It just means that he doesn't say they will definitely go to the lower realms. So there's that kind of thing shakes our future. So to have faith in this. Then there's another quotation, again from the Sutra Samuccaya, in the same section near the end of the Sutra Samuccaya that we just found the translation of the other day. But Lama Tsongkhapa is synthesizing, making the quotations smaller. This is a chapter on defeating the Maras, or as Anne translates, taming the demons. Oops, let me just see here. Do I have that here? Yeah. Okay. So Jimpa translates it, a monk, a bhikshu, who understands all phenomena to be utterly tamed, which is, Anne says, utterly subdued of inherent existence, utterly tamed. They understand even the initial thresholds of misdeeds to be devoid of intrinsic existence, or as Anne says, knows the extremes, which are the origins of faults, are also devoid of inherent existence, and dispels the remorse born of the occurrence of misdeeds. You know, you've created negative actions, you feel great regret and remorse. If you dispel that through understanding emptiness, and thus does not consolidate it, because of this, if that act subdues even the heinous deeds, the actions of immediate retribution, what need is there to speak of the minor deeds, erroneous practices of the rites and moral discipline? So Anne said, a monk who knows all phenomena is utterly subdued of inherent existence and knows that the extremes, which are the origin of faults, are also devoid of inherent existence, is free of contrition for the faults that have occurred and consistently does not commit them. Therefore, even if the deeds of immediate retribution are overwhelmed through knowledge of emptiness, what need is there to say about it overwhelming the trifling faults of wrongly engaging in rites and ethics. Okay, that's another quotation. And then finally, in the Ajatashatru Sutra, who is Ajatashatru? William, do you know? Ajatashatru? Richard knows, I think. Oh no, he's Googling. Okay. John, who is Ajatashatru?
Wasn't Ajatashatru a king, a sort of murderous, psychopathic king that also then became a disciple of the Buddha? Or I get that wrong?
I was pretty close. Paul, what, put fine touch on it.
Yeah, I believe he was a king. He converted to Buddhism. His son, I believe, if I remember correctly, was unhappy with this and had him imprisoned.
Was Ajatashatru the son or the king?
Oh, that's a good question. I forget.
Nadine knows.
Nadine seems.
He was the son of King Bimbisara,
Yeah,
and he imprisoned his king.
yeah. So King Bimbisara had this son Ajatashatru, who was, I think he'd had what, Nadine? He'd had incest with his mother, and he conspired with Devadatta to draw blood from the Tathagata and so forth. And when his father was imprisoned, his father died, and so he had he created the action thereby of having killed his father. So he's committed all these
the trifecta.
Yeah. Maybe what is 5 things? That's a panchafecta or something like that, of deeds of immediate retribution. So Ajatashatru finally was subdued by the Buddha, and even though he'd committed these actions of immediate retribution in that lifetime, through his faith and following the Buddha, he was able to purify them and even became an arhat. So, even you've created negative karma and you think I'm doomed, like Sean thinks he's doomed, right? No, I'm just joking. Emptiness is a salvation. So the quotation says, if someone who has committed a heinous act, an action of immediate retribution, hears his teaching and engages with it and aspires for it, I do not speak of his karmic deed as being a karmic obscuration. So as Anne says, when someone who has committed a deed of immediate retribution enters into and has belief in this excellent doctrine upon hearing it, excellent doctrine here meaning about emptiness, I do not call that a deed of karmic obscuration. Again, the Buddha saying, you shouldn't think that that's like usually when we talk about acts of immediate retribution, there's no hope. In the Hinayana tradition, it's that you will, no matter what you do, next life you're going to hell, you do not pass go, do not collect $200 or whatever, you're going directly to hell. But in the Mahayana, it's said that even that kind of obscuration in your mind, having created any one of the 5 actions of immediate retribution, sometimes earlier people translate as heinous crimes and so forth. That is not an obscuration. Such are the benefits of teaching and listening to the profound truth. These are also the benefits of aspiring for and contemplating on it on other occasions. So, we were listening to the teachings of emptiness. We're hearing more and more. Spend some time admiring it, aspiring for it, contemplating its benefits and so forth. Now to optimize, Lama Khapa says, now to optimize the benefits received from expounding the profound truth, 2 conditions must be present. One's motivation must be pure, through not seeking gifts, honor, or fame. Usually in Tibetan, we say kurti, so you don't give the teachings or engage in them in order to become famous, to receive gifts. have servants and so forth. And one must not misconstrue the meaning of the teaching one is expounding, but explain it without distortion. For it has been said that if one expounds on the basis of both or either of these two faults, this will impede the gathering of great stores of merit. So if you are trying to practice, understand emptiness, or trying to teach it, if you have either seeking kurti or you misconstrue the teachings, that will impede the gathering of great stores of merit. And so Vasubandhu said in his Abhidharma Kosha Bhasham, his own commentary to Abhidharma Kosha Karikas that he wrote, therefore, those who expound the Dharma inaccurately and expound it with afflicted mind, yearning for gifts, honor, and fame, will undermine their own great store of merit. As Anne translated, therefore, persons who explain the doctrine erroneously or who, having an afflicted mind, explain it out of a desire for good services or fame, cause a large amount of their own merit to degenerate. And finally, the same is true here as well, since the listener too must have a pure motivation. I have to have a pure motivation. You should have a pure motivation and not misconstrue the meaning. Both teacher and student should ensure that at least a minimum of qualifications is present when teaching and listening. Okay, so that finishes this preliminary section. Next time, we're going to start the nitty-gritty, the tough bones, identifying the object of negation. And Lama Tsongkhapa's Gompa. So this is not found in Chandrakirti. These are additional things that Lama Tsongkhapa thought to impart in his commentary on that. So before we finish, what do you thought? Any thoughts, doubts? John?
This is not a doubt, but just to follow, so I don't forget to ask you, in your crusade against the word diamond in the title of that sutra, I just suddenly remembered that in Meditation on Emptiness, Jeffrey Hopkins' great book, I think he's citing Jangyan Sheba. He refers to a method of emptiness meditation he calls diamond slivers.
Right.
And I
I
know that's different, and I wondered if you knew what the word is that he's translating.
I don't know. Paul, do you know?
But it really is diamond.
Yeah, I think it is diamond. So that's different. Michael Roach worked for a diamond company in the diamond district of New York, and so he, besides the Vajracharaka being called Diamond Sutra in China, he kind of immortalized people calling it the Diamond Cutter Sutra by translate his own translation called the Diamond Cutter. So any other comments, observations?
Venerable George.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it actually is, it's Dorje Zekma. So it is also Dorje, I think, for diamond slivers. But I don't know, maybe there's a reference to a different Tibet Sanskrit. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. We'll check on that. Sean? Are we doomed?
Well, I just wanted to ask if this is true. I mean, I've been listening to teachings on emptiness for probably almost daily for the past year, and don't see many results from that.
Right.
So
well,
does that just mean my heinous actions are much greater than this vast store that's being generated?
When someone has created virtuous karma, they don't necessarily see immediate benefits, right? So, for instance, like the famous thing in the world, why do bad things happen to good people? There's a whole genre of books about this, like, why does garbage happen to people who are kind and so forth? Because your accumulation of merit does not immediately ripen right now. It does provide a cooperative cause to make realizations, but it won't be realized right now. So all of the merit and collection of wisdom that you've accumulated in the last year, and since you studied with Geshe Zopa and us at Deer Park, Paul was there also for some of those lectures when Deer Park, you were there with your present wife for some of those teachings. All of those collections of merit and wisdom are not apparent. It's not as though suddenly your life becomes, without any problems. But hopefully, if you are actually attending to the teachings and understanding them correctly and applying them, when problems happen, you're able to use antidotes that those problems don't overcome you in the way that they did before. Are you more angry? Not that you were angry before, but are you more angry now than when you were a youth, having studied about emptiness and the Dharma? Are you more attached?
Not sure. I guess as a kid, I didn't have as many worries. So,
okay, so you have to
but
apply.
by attending these teachings, for example, like my daughter is like almost not talking to me now because she feels like I've abandoned her every Saturday for the past year.
Oh my gosh. We should get into the teaching so she can join you. Okay.
Same here, Sean. You're not alone.
So, Jennifer, last question.
Thank you, Venerable George. I just had a question about, I was talking about some of the pitfalls of Dzogchen type of practice. At the same time, it's like, for instance, Yangtze Rinpoche was leading a retreat this summer, and he was really trying to encourage us to have a non-conceptual sort of sinking into the emptiness and just like, directly trying to observe it without words, because words don't quite meet the description. And so I'm curious, and he thought it can be a very quick path. And so I'm just curious, what your take is on that method and how it might complement the analytical approach.
Okay, so it's talking about especially Mahamudra, non-conceptualization, and so forth. Yeah, that is very beneficial. And even Hashan or Hoshan proposed such, but misunderstanding that thinking that that particular kind of meditation of non-conceptualizing, not having thoughts, just experiencing that state, that will lead you immediately to enlightenment or liberation. That was what was called the known as the instantaneous path, without having to go through the path of the perfections, collecting merit, and so forth. Kamala Shila, in his debates with Hashan or Hoshan, and the whole Tibetan Buddhist tradition no longer took as instantaneous enlightenment as being something that had a great validity. When the Dalai Lama talks about this term instantaneous enlightenment and so forth, what he says is that it's possible for individuals who have created karmic imprints in past lives simply by practicing in meditation, in contemplation, various facets of the teachings now, that great realizations can seemingly come out of nowhere instantaneously. But that is because they've provided the cooperative conditions now for karma that they've created in the past, and listening and practicing the Dharma, that can arise now. So the Mahamudra teachings, especially giving sort of like giving precedence to this state of non-conceptuality. So, say in the Kargyuningma traditions of Mahamudra, when we talk about the conventional clear light nature of the mind, there's more talking about it as a positive phenomena, as we will hopefully be talking more with Nadine. Nadine was asking about this sometime, whether conventional clear light nature of mind is a non-affirming negation or whether it's a positive phenomena. So in the Kargyuningma, they talk about this conventional clear light nature of the mind, which you engage in first of all as a prelude to realizing emptiness, is a positive phenomena, just luminosity and non-conceptuality. Of course, that is also present in the meditation on the non-affirming negation type of clear light nature of the mind that we meditate in the morning. The mind is still conceptual, but it's not conceptualizing. That means there's not thoughts coming, continuous conversation coming. You concentrate on one thing and obliterate those. So that is obviously a very positive thing. And I think Yangtze Rinpoche, tapping into the experience of Western practitioners, realize that a lot of times people need to have more non-conceptual states. But I think he himself, having studied all of these texts in great detail, having been a student of Geshe Zopa, would in confidence say, of course, in order to realize emptiness, you have to analyze, you have to develop these understandings, apply them with Vipassana and so forth. But for us Western students, this is a very, very, very important way to make rapid progress by not being so caught up in conceptualizing. Okay. Rocio, what do you think? Last.
Well, following up with, and I might be wrong because I am, statistically wrong, but I believe Yangtze Rinpoche teaches Mahamudra after teaching Madhyamika. So I remember is like, once you get an idea of the holding the correct view, then that's when you can go and do like mind seeing mind. And that way you develop that flavor, that taste that will allow you to go back to Madhyamika. So I think that he always circles them.
You need to have both. So the general Sutra Mahamudra in the Gelugpa tradition is that you can initiate using this kind of meditation on non-conceptuality, meditating on the clear light nature of the mind as a prelude. And then once you've had an experience of that developing shamatha, you apply that concentrated mind, joining it with analysis, with Vipassana, meditating on the emptiness of the person. And then once you've realized that, you meditate on the emptiness of the mind. And then then that's a higher meaning of that's meditating on the ultimate clear light nature of the mind. And then you apply that to the tantric Mahamudra, where you bring the airs into the central channel, having a remembering consciousness of the meaning of emptiness. You generate the subtlemost clear light mind and bring to the stages of the death evolution, through the mirage-like vision and the smoke-like vision, the firefly, the dying lamp, the white, red, and black appearances. When the clear light arises, you've brought along those stages a remembering consciousness of the meaning of emptiness. And then when that vacuity appears to your mental consciousness, again, it's not like to your eyes, right? It's to your mental consciousness. You immediately can bring to that subtlemost mind your remembering consciousness of emptiness, and that's when the great that's kind of like the final meaning of the Chakya Chempo, the Mahamudra, the great seal, when the subtlemost mind realizes emptiness. Okay, so Snehi, would you like to put up the dedication prayers. I've gone over quite a bit today, sorry. So due to these merits, due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha. May I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception. That's the Tibetan Chikyang Malupa. Each and every migrator without exception, even your enemies, into that enlightened state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen in my mind stream not diminish, but increase more and more. And then composed by the Dalai Lama, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the conquerors, you Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, the conqueror Losang, Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa, you who are the spiritual father of your two spiritual sons, Gyaltsab-je and Khedrup-je, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and your practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. Sole gateway through which all benefits and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. You passed away. At this I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels, and by the great waves of bodhicitta, of the conqueror's children, the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. You teachers who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, you are the supreme gateway for us fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging as you will with skillful means, that means both method and wisdom side, as we saw, moved by mercy, that's sewa, all illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. And then finally, just try to stabilize these through a meditation on the emptiness of the three spheres, the goals that we're dedicated to, the virtues that we are dedicating in the process of dedication. All are insubstantial, like clear light. They are merely appearances to the mind, although that being mere appearances doesn't mean that they don't function. The law of cause and effect still functions due to the creation of these virtues. These goals will eventually be achieved if the virtues are not destroyed by anger and abandoning the Dharma, criticizing bodhisattvas, and so forth. Thank you for your patience and for your strong teeth and gums in chewing these tough bones. Look forward to seeing some of you on Monday for our discussion group, but necessarily, hopefully next Saturday. Diana, both Dianas are out today. Brother Shanka is sick. I think one or two other people might be missing, but hope to see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Meditate.
Mhm.